A wealthy man, accustomed to luxury and easy solutions, was about to experience a turning point in his life. One day, he encounters a humble woman on a train and falls in love. He was sterile and wanted to win her over to try to have children, but it was difficult. Everyone laughed at him, but years later they were left speechless. Before hearing this passionate account, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. The luxurious first-class carriage cut through the landscape at high speed, but for Robert Anderson, it seemed as if time had stopped. Seated in his leather armchair, the 45-year-old businessman distractedly observed the screen of his laptop, not really paying attention to the numbers dancing before his eyes. His mind wandered, as it always did in recent years, through the vast empty rooms of his mansion, through lonely dinners and endless nights. Robert was the picture of success in the eyes of the world, owner of one of the largest construction companies in the country. With a fortune that made many dream, he had everything money could buy. However, the one thing he truly desired seemed to be eternally out of his reach. A sudden jolt of the train brought him back to reality. Robert looked around, irritated by the interruption of his thoughts, when his eyes fixed on an unusual scene. A young woman in simple clothes and a worn backpack was trying to balance a tray of coffee while moving through the aisle. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, trying to pass by Robert. He stared at her for a moment, intrigued by her presence in first class. "You shouldn't be here," he responded dryly. "This section is for first-class passengers only." The woman, who couldn't have been more than 30 years old, looked at him with a mixture of surprise and determination. "I know, sir. I'm just doing my job. I'm the new attendant for the dining car." Robert frowned. "Well, then do your job quietly and don't disturb the passengers." The woman nodded, but before she could move, the train shook again. The tray in her hands trembled dangerously, and in an instant, the hot coffee spilled over Robert's impeccable suit. "Oh my God!" she exclaimed, horrified. "I'm so sorry, sir, I'm so sorry." Robert stood up abruptly, feeling the hot liquid trickling down his chest. His eyes flashed with anger. "Look what you've done. This suit costs more than you make in a year." The woman, with trembling hands, tried to clean up the mess with a small napkin. "Please forgive me, it was an accident. Enough!" Robert interrupted her. "Don't touch me, you've done enough damage. I want to speak to your supervisor immediately." The other passengers watched the scene with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. The woman, with tears in her eyes, lowered her head. "Yes, sir. I'll call him right away." As she walked away, Robert felt a pang of something he didn't immediately recognize. Guilt? Remorse? He shook his head, pushing away these thoughts. After all, he was Robert Anderson. He didn't owe explanations to anyone, much less to a simple attendant who couldn't do her job properly. But when his eyes met hers again, something changed. For a brief moment, he saw in those brown eyes a depth that surprised him. There wasn't just fear or submission as he expected. There was also a silent strength, a dignity that left him momentarily speechless. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. "Sarah," she responded, lifting her chin slightly. "Sarah Mitchell." Robert felt a strange tightness in his chest. Sarah, a simple name, but one that somehow seemed to illuminate the environment around him. "Well, Sarah," he said, adjusting his stained jacket, "perhaps I overreacted a bit. Accidents happen." Sarah looked at him with surprise, a small smile forming on her lips. "Thank you, sir. I promise I'll make it up to you somehow." At that moment, Robert didn't know it, but that accidental encounter was about to change the course of his life forever. As the train continued its journey, taking him back to his life of luxury and loneliness, something inside him had shifted. A small crack in his carefully constructed armor, through which a ray of light began to infiltrate. The supervisor arrived, profusely apologizing and offering to pay for the cleaning of the suit. Robert, to his own surprise, dismissed the offer with a gesture. "It won't be necessary," he said, his eyes still fixed on Sarah. "Sometimes we need a little chaos in our perfectly organized lives." Sarah smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face in a way that Robert found inexplicably captivating. And so, in that train car between coffee stains and murmured apologies, a story began that neither of them could have predicted. As the train continued on its way, Robert found himself thinking about Sarah long after she had disappeared towards the dining car. There was something about her, an authenticity that he hadn't encountered in years in his world of business and appearances. It was as if, for a brief moment, he had glimpsed a different life, an existence beyond the numbers in his bank account and the cold walls of his mansion. The rest of the journey passed in a blur, with Robert alternating between reviewing documents on his laptop and discreetly looking down the aisle hoping to see Sarah again. When the train finally arrived at the station, he found himself hesitating, a part of him wishing for one more chance to talk to her. But the moment had passed. Robert got off the train, returning to his usual life. However, as he walked along the platform towards his waiting driver, he couldn't help but look back, searching one last time for that face that, in a matter of minutes, had become unforgettable. Sarah Mitchell. A name that would echo in his mind in the days to come. A reminder that sometimes the most significant things in life can arise in the most unexpected moments. Days passed since the incident on the train, but Robert couldn't get Sarah out of his head. Sitting in his office on the top floor of one of the most imposing skyscrapers in the city, he found himself daydreaming, recalling the sincere smile and determined eyes of that woman. "Mr. Anderson?" His secretary's voice brought him back to reality. "You have a meeting with the board in 5 minutes." Robert nodded, adjusting his tie. "Thank you, Jessica. I'll be there in a moment." As he walked through the mirrored corridors towards the meeting room, Robert reflected on how that brief encounter on the train had affected him. It was as if Sarah had opened a window in a long-closed room, letting in a fresh breeze of possibilities. The meeting proceeded as usual. Numbers, graphs, projections. But for the first time in years, Robert felt restless, as if something was missing amid all that corporate success. "What about the new housing project, Mr. Anderson?" asked one of the directors. "I believe it's a great opportunity to expand our brand in the middle-class market." Robert hesitated for a moment, an idea beginning to form in his mind. "Actually, gentlemen, I've been thinking, what if, instead of focusing solely on profit, we considered a social housing project?" A stunned silence took over the room. The executives looked at each other, confused by their CEO's sudden change of direction. "Social housing?" questioned another director skeptically. "Sir, with all due respect, that's not exactly our target market." Robert leaned forward, a determined gleam in his eyes. "Exactly why we should consider it. Imagine the impact we could have, not just in terms of social responsibility, but also in diversifying our portfolio." As he elaborated on his vision, Robert realized he was speaking not just as a businessman, but as someone who was beginning to see beyond the zeros in a bank account. The image of Sarah, with her silent dignity in the face of adversity, seemed to have planted a seed of change in his heart. After the meeting, alone in his office, Robert allowed himself a moment of introspection. He walked to the panoramic window, observing the city sprawling below. How many Sarahs were out there, struggling daily, dreaming of a decent home? His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Martha, his head housekeeper. "Mr. Anderson, I'm sorry to bother you, but we have a problem at the mansion. 2 of our staff have suddenly quit, and we're having difficulties replacing them." Robert frowned. "I see, Martha. Do what's necessary to resolve the situation. Hire whoever you need to." As he hung up, a bold idea crossed his mind. What if... No, it would be crazy. But the image of Sarah persisted, as if fate was trying to tell him something. Decided, he picked up the phone again. "Jessica, I need you to do something for me. Get in touch with the railway company. I want information about an employee named Sarah Mitchell." As he waited for the information, Robert wondered what exactly he was doing. Was it just curiosity? Or was there something more, a desire to reconnect with that brief moment of authenticity he had experienced on the train? Hours later, Jessica entered his office with a small dossier. "Sir, here's the information you requested about Sarah Mitchell." Robert leafed through the document, absorbing every detail. Sarah was single, 28 years old, lived in a simple neighborhood on the outskirts of town, and had been supporting 2 younger siblings alone since their parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. Something inside him warmed as he read about her dedication to her family. It was a quality he admired, something that was missing in his own solitary life. Making a sudden decision, Robert picked up the phone. "Martha, about those vacancies at the mansion, I think I have a candidate in mind." As he dialed Sarah's number, provided in the dossier, Robert felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation that he hadn't experienced in years. What would she say? How would she react to his proposal? "Hello?" Sarah's soft, familiar voice sounded from the other end of the line. "Hello, Sarah. This is Robert Anderson. I don't know if you remember me, but we met in a rather unusual situation on the train a few days ago." There was a pause, and then, "Of course I remember you, Mr. Anderson. How could I forget? I hope your suit turned out all right after cleaning." Robert smiled, surprising himself. "It turned out fine, don't worry. Actually, I'm calling because I have a proposal for you. I have some open positions in my household staff, and I was wondering if you'd be interested." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Finally, Sarah responded, her voice a mixture of surprise and caution. I don't know what to say, Mr. Anderson. It's a very generous offer, but please think about it," Robert gently interrupted. "The salary will be significantly higher than your current one, and there will be additional benefits. Plus, if you accept, you could bring your siblings to live on the mansion grounds." He could practically hear the gears turning in Sarah's mind. "How do you know about my siblings?" Robert hesitated, realizing his mistake. "I did some research. I hope you're not offended. I was just trying to better understand your situation to make the best possible offer." There was another moment of silence, and then Sarah spoke, her voice firm. "Mr. Anderson, I sincerely appreciate your offer. It's very generous, but I need some time to think. This would completely change our lives." "Of course, I completely understand," Robert replied, feeling a mix of relief and disappointment. "Take all the time you need. My offer stands." As he hung up the phone, Robert leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the conversation. For the first time in years, he felt he had done something truly meaningful. It wasn't just about filling a vacancy or doing charity. It was about connection, about giving fate a chance. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in golden and pink hues, Robert wondered what the future held. Would Sarah accept his offer? And if she did, how would her presence change the dynamics of the mansion? More importantly, how would it change him? With these questions echoing in his mind, Robert prepared to leave the office. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, he felt truly anxious to discover what would come next. The phone rang at the Anderson mansion, echoing through the marble corridors. Martha, the head housekeeper, answered promptly. "Anderson residence, good morning." "Good morning," replied a hesitant voice on the other end. "This is Sarah Mitchell. I'd like to speak with Mr. Anderson, please." Martha frowned, not recognizing the name. "Mr. Anderson is in an important meeting. Can I help you?" "Ah, yes," Sarah responded, her voice gaining confidence. "He offered me a job recently. I'm calling to accept the proposal." Martha's eyes widened. She hadn't been informed about any new hire. "One moment, please," she said, putting the call on hold. Minutes later, Robert was on the phone, an involuntary smile forming on his lips. "Sarah, it's good to hear your voice. So you've decided to accept?" "Yes, Mr. Anderson," Sarah replied. "After much thought, I believe this is a unique opportunity for me and my siblings. We're ready for this change." Robert felt a wave of satisfaction wash over him. "Excellent. Martha, our head housekeeper, will take care of all the details. When can you start?" "In a week, if that's convenient. I need to organize some things here first." "Perfect. I can't wait to welcome you." "Welcome to the Anderson family, Sarah." As he hung up, Robert turned to Martha, who was watching him with an intrigued expression. "Martha, prepare everything for Sarah and her two siblings' arrival. They'll stay in the east wing of the mansion." Martha nodded, still confused. "Sir, if I may ask, who exactly is this Sarah?" Robert smiled, remembering the encounter on the train. "Someone who's going to bring a much-needed change to this house, Martha. Trust me." In the days that followed, the Anderson mansion buzzed with activity. Rooms were prepared, uniforms ordered, and an atmosphere of expectation hung in the air. The other staff whispered among themselves, curious about the mysterious new hire who seemed to have fallen into the boss's good graces. Finally, the day arrived. A car sent by Robert pulled up in front of the mansion, and Sarah and her siblings got out, Jake, 15 years old, and Emily, 12. Their eyes widened at the imposing structure before them. "Wow," Emily whispered, clutching her sister's hand. "It's like a castle." Sarah smiled nervously, adjusting the strap of her worn backpack. "Remember, kids, we're here to work. Behave, okay? Martha greeted them at the entrance, her appraising gaze sweeping over the trio. Welcome to the Anderson mansion. Please follow me. I'll show you to your quarters. As they walked through the luxurious corridors, Sarah couldn't help but feel out of place. Everything here screamed wealth and sophistication, a world completely different from her own. Sarah! Robert's voice made her turn. He was coming towards her, a warm smile on his face. I'm glad you arrived safely. I hope you find everything to your liking. Sarah nodded, a little intimidated. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. It's very kind of you. Robert bent down to be at eye level with Jake and Emily. And you must be Sarah's siblings. Welcome to your new home. Emily smiled shyly, while Jake maintained a cautious expression. Sarah could feel the tension in her brother and knew that the adjustment wouldn't be easy for any of them. Martha will show you everything, Robert continued. Sarah, when you're settled, I'd like to talk to you in my office. The following hours were a rush of unpacking, meeting other staff members and trying to orient themselves in the enormous mansion. Sarah felt as if she were in a dream, fearing she would wake up at any moment. When she finally knocked on Robert's office door, her heart was racing. Come in, came the response from the other side. Robert was sitting behind an imposing mahogany desk, but his smile was welcoming. Sarah, please have a seat. How are you all adapting? It's been surreal, to be honest, Sarah replied, settling into the chair. But we're grateful for the opportunity, Mr. Anderson. Robert, please, he insisted. I want you to feel comfortable here, Sarah. I know it's a big change, but I believe it will be good for all of us. Sarah observed him curiously. If I may ask, why me? Why did you choose us? Robert hesitated, pondering his answer. Let's say our encounter on the train made me realize that sometimes we need new perspectives in our lives. You impressed me with your dignity and strength, Sarah. I believe your presence here will bring something this house has long lacked, humanity. Robert's words touched Sarah deeply. She felt an unexpected connection with this man who, just a few weeks ago, had seemed so distant and unreachable. Thank you for the trust, she said softly. I'll do my best not to disappoint you. When Sarah left the office, she felt lighter, more confident. Maybe, she thought, this drastic change was exactly what she and her siblings needed. However, not everyone in the mansion shared Robert's enthusiasm. Martha, in particular, observed the newcomer with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. Something about the way the boss looked at Sarah deeply bothered her. Jessica, Martha called Robert's personal assistant. What do you know about this, Sarah? Jessica shrugged. Not much. Mr. Anderson asked for some information about her a few weeks ago, but didn't go into details. Martha narrowed her eyes, watching Sarah interact with the other staff. Well, it looks like we'll have to keep an eye on her, won't we? After all, we need to protect Mr. Anderson's interests. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Sarah was helping her siblings familiarize themselves with the new environment. Emily seemed enchanted with everything, but Jake maintained a closed expression. Jake, Sarah called softly, using her brother's full name. Is everything okay? Jake stared at her, his eyes full of conflicting emotions. Why are we here, Sarah? This place, these people. It's not our world. Sarah sighed, pulling her brother into a hug. I know it's hard, Jake, but this is a chance to give you two a better life. Please give it a chance. As the sun set, painting the sky in golden hues, Sarah looked out the kitchen window at the well-manicured gardens of the mansion. A new chapter in their lives was beginning, full of promises and uncertainties. What did fate have in store for her and her siblings in this new world? And how would their presence affect the life of the enigmatic Robert Anderson? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Nothing would be the same at the Anderson mansion. Weeks passed at the Anderson mansion, and gradually Sarah and her siblings began to adapt to the new reality. Sarah, with her dedication and efficiency, soon became an essential part of the household staff, earning the respect of many of the employees. Emily flourished in the new environment, enchanted by the private lessons that Robert had insisted on providing for her and Jake. Jake, on the other hand, still struggled to feel at home. The teenager spent most of his time in his room, avoiding interactions with the other residents of the mansion. Sarah worried about her brother, but knew he would need time to adjust. On a sunny afternoon, Robert found Sarah in the garden, where she was tending to the roses with meticulous attention. You have a way with plants, he commented, approaching. Sarah smiled, a slight blush tinging her cheeks. "Thank you, sir. I mean, Robert, I'm still getting used to it." Robert laughed softly. "And how is this adaptation going for you and your siblings?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before answering. "Emily is loving it. The lessons, the books, all of this is a dream for her. But Jake, he's still having difficulties." Robert frowned, genuinely concerned. "Is there anything I can do to help?" "Actually," Sarah began, then stopped, biting her lip. "You can speak, Sarah. I'm here to help. Jake has always been passionate about mechanics. In our old house, he spent hours taking apart and reassembling old appliances. So I think he misses that." Robert's eyes lit up with a sudden idea. "I have something that might interest him. Come with me." Intrigued, Sarah followed Robert to a part of the property she hadn't yet seen. They stopped in front of a large garage. "This is my private collection of classic cars," Robert explained, opening the doors. "Some of them need restoration. Perhaps Jake would like to help with that." Sarah was speechless at the sight of the gleaming vehicles. "Robert, this is amazing. Jake would be ecstatic." At that moment, Martha appeared, her gaze alternating between Sarah and Robert with a barely disguised look of disapproval. "Mr. Anderson, you have an important call waiting in your office," she announced, casting a penetrating look at Sarah. Robert nodded. "Thank you, Martha. Sarah, why don't you bring Jake here later? I'm sure he'll like it." As Robert walked away, Martha approached Sarah. "Miss Mitchell, I hope you're aware of your position here. Don't forget that you're an employee, not a guest." Sarah felt a chill down her spine at Martha's icy tone. "I know very well what my place is, ma'am. I'm just doing my job and taking care of my family." Martha raised an eyebrow. "Make sure it stays that way. It would be a shame if something happened." With those enigmatic words, Martha walked away, leaving Sarah with an uncomfortable feeling. She knew she had made a powerful enemy in the house. Later that day, when Sarah brought Jake to see the garage, the transformation was immediate. The teenager's eyes lit up with excitement at the sight of the classic cars. "Wow, this is incredible," he exclaimed, running from one vehicle to another. "Sarah, did you see this '67 Mustang and that Chevrolet Impala?" Sarah smiled, happy to see her brother excited for the first time in weeks. "Robert said you can help with the restoration of some of them if you want." Jake stopped, his expression changing to suspicion. "Why would he do that? What does he want in return?" "Jake," Sarah sighed, "not everyone has ulterior motives. Sometimes people are just kind." At that moment, Robert entered the garage, smiling at seeing Jake's enthusiasm. "So what do you think of my little collection?" Jake, still cautious but unable to hide his interest, replied, "It's amazing, sir. I've never seen anything like it." Robert approached a 1973 Porsche 911. "This one here needs some engine repairs. Would you like to take a look?" Jake's eyes lit up, but he looked at Sarah, seeking approval. She nodded encouragingly. "I'd love to," Jake responded, finally allowing himself to smile. As the two bent over the open hood of the Porsche, Sarah watched with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. It was wonderful to see Jake opening up, but Martha's words echoed in her mind. What would be the price of this kindness? Outside the garage, hidden in the shadows, Martha observed the scene with narrowed eyes. She took out her cell phone and dialed a number. "Hello? Yes, it's me. I need you to do a complete investigation on Sarah Mitchell and her family. I want to know everything about them. Yes, everything." Hanging up the phone, Martha cast one last look at the garage before walking away. If Sarah thought she could enter Robert Anderson's life so easily, she was very mistaken. Martha was determined to protect not only her job, but also the man she had secretly loved for years. Meanwhile, inside the garage, Robert patiently explained the workings of the engine to Jake, who absorbed every word with fascination. Sarah watched them, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions. Gratitude for the opportunity given to her brother, concern about Martha's intentions, and a growing and inexplicable attraction to Robert. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the garage. A new chapter was unfolding at the Anderson mansion, full of promises, dangers, and unexpected possibilities. Sarah knew she would need to navigate these turbulent waters carefully, protecting her family while exploring the conflicting feelings that were beginning to arise in her heart. As night fell over the mansion, the wheels of fate continued to turn, setting the stage for revelations, confrontations, and perhaps a love that would defy all expectations. As weeks turned into months, Life at the Anderson mansion found a new rhythm. Sarah excelled in her duties, earning the trust and respect of almost all the staff. Jake spent more and more time in the garage, his talent for mechanics flourishing under Robert's guidance. Emily, in turn, shone in her studies, charming her tutors with her intelligence and curiosity. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Robert invited Sarah for a walk through the extensive gardens of the property. As they strolled among the lush flowers, an atmosphere of growing intimacy hung between them. "Sarah," Robert began, his voice soft, "I want you to know how much your presence and that of your siblings has meant to me. You've brought life to this mansion in a way I never imagined possible." Sarah felt her heart race. "Robert, it's us who should be thanking you. The opportunity you've given us. It's changed our lives." They stopped near a marble bench, surrounded by red roses. Robert hesitated for a moment before continuing. "There's something I need to tell you. Something very few people know." Sarah looked at him curiously. "What is it, Robert?" He took a deep breath. "Sarah, I can't have children. I found out years ago, and since then, I've felt an enormous void in my life. Seeing you with your siblings, the way you care for them, it made me realize what was missing." Sarah was speechless for a moment, moved by the vulnerability in his voice. "Oh, Robert, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." He smiled sadly. "There's no reason to be sorry. Actually, having you all here has been a healing for me. Especially you, Sarah." Their gazes met, an electric current of emotion passing between them. Sarah felt her heart racing, aware that they were on the verge of something deep and potentially dangerous. At that moment, the sound of approaching footsteps made them move slightly apart. It was Martha, her face a mask of false concern. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice sugary, "but there's an urgent matter that needs your attention, Mr. Anderson." Robert frowned, clearly irritated by the interruption. "Can't it wait, Martha?" "I'm afraid not, sir. It's about the new housing project." Robert sighed. "Very well, Sarah, we'll talk later, yes?" Sarah nodded, watching him walk away with Martha. She couldn't help but notice the triumphant look the housekeeper cast in her direction. Later that night, as Sarah was tidying up Emily's room, the girl surprised her with an unexpected question. "Sarah, do you like Uncle Robert?" Sarah almost dropped the vase she was holding. "What? Why are you asking that, Emily?" The girl shrugged. "It's just that you smile differently when he's around, and so does he." Sarah felt her face burn. "Emily, it's nothing like that. Mr. Anderson is our employer and we owe him respect. But what if he likes you? It would be nice to have a dad again," Emily said innocently. Emily's words hit Sarah like a punch. She knew she needed to be careful, not just because of her position in the house, but also because of the hopes she might inadvertently awaken in her siblings. Meanwhile, in Robert's office, a tense conversation was unfolding. "Martha, what exactly are you insinuating?" Robert asked, his voice laden with irritation. Martha placed a folder on his desk. "Sir, I did an investigation into Sarah's past and her family. There are concerning inconsistencies." Robert reluctantly opened the folder, his eyes scanning the documents. His expression changed from irritation to concern. This can't be right," he muttered. Martha nodded gravely. "I'm afraid it's true, sir. Sarah is not who she claims to be. And there's more. I discovered she has a connection to your old business rival, Edward Thompson." Robert felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Edward Thompson was the man who had almost destroyed his company years ago in a dirty corporate maneuver. "What do you suggest, Martha?" he asked, his voice tired. "I think we should confront her, sir. Demand explanations, and if necessary, take drastic measures." Robert closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. The trust he had placed in Sarah, the feelings that were beginning to blossom, everything seemed to be crumbling. That night, the Anderson mansion was plunged into a tense silence. Sarah, unaware of the storm that was forming, fell asleep with a smile on her lips, reliving her moment with Robert in the garden. Little did she know that the next day, her life was about to be turned upside down. The revelations that would come would threaten not only her job, but also the fragile bond that had formed between her and Robert. As the pale moon cast restless shadows through the corridors of the mansion, the fates of its inhabitants became entangled in an increasingly complex knot. Secrets, lies, and long-buried truths were about to come to light, testing bonds, challenging loyalties, and potentially destroying newly discovered dreams. The dawn would bring with it not just a new day, but the beginning of a battle for the future, for truth, and perhaps for love. Sarah, Robert, and everyone around them were about to discover how far they would go to protect what they valued most. The sun had barely risen when Sarah was summoned to Robert's office. The urgent tone of the message left her apprehensive, and she felt a knot in her stomach as she walked through the mansion's corridors. Upon entering the office, Sarah immediately sensed something was wrong. Robert was standing by the window, his demeanor serious and distant. Martha was seated in a nearby chair, a cold smile on her lips. "Sarah, please sit down," Robert said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. Sarah obeyed, feeling her heart race. "Has something happened, Robert?" He turned to face her, his eyes hard. "I'm afraid so, Sarah. Or should I say, Mary Dawson?" Sarah's blood ran cold. That name, which she had buried so long ago, resurfaced to haunt her. How do you know that?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Martha intervened, her voice laden with triumph. "We did a complete investigation into you and your family, Miss Mitchell. Or should I say, Mrs. Thompson?" Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the world crumble around her. "Please, I can explain." Robert slammed his hand on the desk, making her jump. "Explain what? That you lied about your identity? That you omitted the fact that you're married to Edward Thompson, the man who almost destroyed my company?" Tears began to stream down Sarah's face. "It's not what you're thinking, Robert. Please let me explain." "Speak," he ordered, his voice cold. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. "My real name is Mary Dawson Thompson. I was married to Edward, yes, but I left him 4 years ago when I discovered the extent of his illegal business dealings." She paused, gathering courage to continue. "Jake and Emily aren't my siblings, they're my children. I changed our identities to protect us from Edward. He's a dangerous man, Robert. He threatened to take the children from me if I left him." Robert stared at her, his expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. "And why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I was afraid," Sarah responded, her voice choked. "Afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd send us away. Afraid that Edward would find us. I just wanted a fresh start for me and my children." Martha snorted, incredulous. "And you expect us to believe this fantastic story? Mr. Anderson, she's obviously lying to save herself." Robert raised his hand, silencing Martha. His eyes never left Sarah's face. "Continue," he said, his voice softer now. Sarah nodded, grateful for the opportunity. "When we met on the train, I had no idea who you were. It was only later, when you offered me the job, that I realized the connection. But by that point, I couldn't refuse anymore. It was our only chance for a better life." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert walked slowly to his chair and sat down, the weight of the revelations visible on his shoulders. "Martha, leave us alone, please," he finally said. The housekeeper hesitated, casting a distrustful look at Sarah. "Sir, I don't think—" "Now, Martha," Robert insisted, his voice leaving no room for arguments. As soon as the door closed behind Martha, Robert leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Sarah. "I want to believe you, Sarah, or Mary, but you have to understand that this changes everything." Sarah nodded, wiping away her tears. "I know, and I'm sorry for lying, but everything I said about my feelings, about my gratitude, all of that is true, Robert." He sighed deeply. "And the children? Do they know?" "No," Sarah replied. "To them, Edward is just a distant memory, a father who abandoned them. They don't know the truth about who he really is." Robert abruptly stood up, walking to the window. "I need time to process all of this, Sarah. You understand, don't you?" Sarah felt her heart tighten. "Yes, I understand." "What? What's going to happen to us now?" He turned to face her, his expression softening slightly. "For now, nothing changes. You can stay, but we need to be cautious. If what you say about Edward is true, we could all be in danger." Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Thank you, Robert. I promise I won't disappoint you again." When Sarah left the office, her legs could barely support her. Outside, Martha was waiting for her, her gaze filled with contempt. "This isn't over," the housekeeper hissed. "Don't think you can fool everyone with your lies." Sarah raised her chin, meeting Martha's gaze. "I have nothing more to hide, Martha. Do what you want with that information." As Sarah walked away, Martha took out her phone, dialing a familiar number. "Hello? Yes, it's me. I have information about Mary Dawson Thompson. I think Mr. Edward Thompson will be very interested to know where his wife is. The day progressed at the Anderson mansion, but the storm of revelations and secrets was far from over. Sarah, now exposed, struggled to maintain her composure while trying to protect her children. Robert, torn between reason and heart, faced one of the most difficult decisions of his life. And in the shadows, Martha's machinations threatened to bring an even greater danger within the mansion's walls. The past that Sarah had tried so hard to leave behind was about to catch up with her, bringing with it consequences that no one could predict. Night fell over the property, laden with tension and uncertainty. The pieces on the board had been violently shaken, and now every move, every decision, could change the fate of all involved. The truth had been revealed, but at what cost? And what would the dawn bring for the inhabitants of the Anderson mansion? The days that followed at the Anderson mansion were tense. Sarah walked the corridors like a shadow, feeling the curious and judgmental gazes of the other staff members. Robert, for his part, kept his distance, immersed in his thoughts and endless meetings. On a particularly gloomy afternoon, Jake found Sarah in the garden, his face a mask of concern. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, sitting next to her on the bench. "You've been acting strange, Mr. Henderson barely talks to us. Something's wrong, isn't it?" Sarah felt her heart tighten. She knew she could no longer hide the truth from her children. "Jake, there's something I need to tell you and Emily. Something about our past." That night, in the privacy of the room they shared, Sarah gathered her children and, with tears in her eyes, told them the whole truth. About her real name, about Edward, about the dangers that made them flee. Emily, with her big, frightened eyes, clung to her mother. "So, everything was a lie?" "No, my love," Sarah replied, stroking her daughter's hair. "The love I have for you, our family, that was always real. We were just protecting ourselves." Jake remained silent for a long moment, processing everything. Finally, he spoke. "And Mr. Anderson, does he know all this?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, he found out recently. That's why things are complicated." "Are we going to have to leave?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Sarah hugged both children tightly. "I don't know, sweetheart, but no matter what happens, we'll be together. Always." Meanwhile, in Robert's office, a tense conversation was unfolding. "Sir, with all due respect, we can't ignore the danger this woman poses," Martha insisted. "If what she says about Edward Thompson is true, we're all at risk." Robert massaged his temples, feeling the weight of the situation. "I know, Martha, but I can't just throw them out. The children, they're not to blame." Martha leaned forward, her voice low and persuasive. "There are other ways to deal with this, sir. We could arrange for them to be relocated safely, of course." Robert stared at her, his eyes narrowing. "What exactly are you suggesting, Martha?" Before she could answer, the phone rang. Robert answered, his expression changing from irritation to shock. "How is that possible?" Yes, I understand. Keep me informed." He hung up, his face pale. "That was my contact in the police. Edward Thompson has been seen in town." Martha paled. "He's found us." "Not yet," Robert replied, standing up. "But it's only a matter of time. We need to act fast." That same night, in a luxurious hotel downtown, Edward Thompson smiled at his reflection in the mirror as he adjusted his tie. His cell phone vibrated, and he answered with a predatory smile. "So she's really there? Excellent work. You'll be well rewarded for this information, my dear." Hanging up the phone, Edward took a photo frame from his suitcase. In it, a picture of Sarah, or Mary Dawson as he knew her, smiling with two small children. "Finally found you, darling," he murmured. "It's time to reunite our family." Back at the mansion, Sarah woke up in the middle of the night with a sense of dread. Something was wrong, she could feel it. Rising silently so as not to wake the children, she walked to the window. That's when she saw it. An unfamiliar car parked at the property gates, and leaning against it, a figure she would never forget. Edward. Panic overwhelmed her. How had he found them? What would she do now? At that moment, a hand touched her shoulder, making her stifle a scream. It was Robert. "He's here," Sarah whispered, trembling. Robert nodded gravely. "I know. Come with me. We need to get you and the children out of here immediately." As Sarah woke Jake and Emily, quickly explaining the situation, Robert coordinated with his security team. In minutes, an escape plan was in action. "You'll go to one of my properties in the countryside," Robert explained as he guided them through a secret corridor. "You'll be safe there until we resolve this." Sarah looked at him, tears in her eyes. "Why are you helping us after everything?" Robert stopped looking at her intently. "Because despite the lies, I believe in you, Sarah. And because," he hesitated, "because I care about you more than I should." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the mansion. Edward had entered. "Quick," Robert urged, pushing them towards the back exit where a car was waiting. As the vehicle sped down the dark road, taking Sarah and her children away from immediate danger, Robert remained at the mansion, preparing to face the man who threatened to destroy everything he had begun to love. The night enveloped the property in shadows, the air heavy with tension and imminent danger. The past and present had violently collided, and the consequences of this collision were just beginning to unfold. Meanwhile, somewhere on the dark road, Sarah hugged her children, praying for their safety and wondering if they would ever find peace. And in her heart, a new hope began to blossom. The hope that perhaps in Robert she had found not just a protector, but someone who could love her despite her turbulent past. The morning would bring new challenges and dangers, but for now, in the darkness of night, the family fled towards an uncertain future, leaving behind a man determined to protect them, no matter the cost. The sun had barely risen when Robert found himself face to face with Edward Thompson in his office. The air was charged with tension, two titans of the corporate world measuring their strength in a long-awaited confrontation. "Where's my family, Anderson?" Edward demanded, his falsely cordial tone barely disguising the underlying threat. Robert remained impassive. "I don't know what you're talking about, Thompson. This is private property and you're trespassing." Edward laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "Don't play games with me. I know Mary and my children are here, or were until recently. If you have any complaints, I suggest you take them to the proper authorities," Robert responded, his voice firm. "Now I ask you to leave." Edward's eyes flashed dangerously. "This isn't over, Anderson. You have no idea who you're dealing with." When Edward finally left, Robert let out a sigh of relief. Immediately, he picked up his phone to check on Sarah and the children. Meanwhile, miles away, Sarah, Jake, and Emily arrived at Robert's country house. It was an isolated property, surrounded by dense forest, the perfect hideout. "Mum, how long are we going to stay here?" Emily asked, her big eyes full of fear and confusion. Sarah hugged her daughter, trying to convey a calmness she didn't feel. "I don't know, sweetie. But we're safe here, that's what matters." Jake, on the other hand, remained silent, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar environment with distrust. Sarah could see the anger and disappointment in his gaze, and her heart ached for not being able to protect her children from this harsh reality. The phone rang, startling everyone. It was Robert. "Sarah, did you all arrive safely?" "Yes, we're all fine," she answered, feeling unexpected relief at hearing his voice. "Robert, what happened?" "Edward. He was here," Robert interrupted, "but he's gone now, for the time being at least." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the situation. "I'm so sorry for involving you in all this, Robert. You didn't deserve—" "Don't apologize," he gently interrupted. "We're in this together now. I'm going to resolve this situation, I promise." When they hung up, Sarah turned to her children, determined to keep hope alive. "Come on, kids. Let's explore our new temporary home." Back at the mansion, Robert met with his security team and lawyers, devising strategies to legally protect Sarah and the children. That's when Martha entered, her face a mask of concern. "Mr. Anderson, may I speak with you privately?" Robert nodded, dismissing the others. As soon as they were alone, Martha broke down in tears. "Forgive me, sir, I did something terrible." Robert felt his blood run cold. "What did you do, Martha?" Between sobs, Martha confessed that it was she who had informed Edward about Sarah's whereabouts. "I was jealous," she admitted. "I thought I was protecting you, but I was wrong." Robert stared at her, a mixture of anger and disappointment in his eyes. "Do you have any idea of the danger you've put Sarah and the children in? That you've put us in?" Martha lowered her head, ashamed. "I know, and I'll do anything to make it right." After a tense moment, Robert spoke. "You're going to help us protect them now, Martha. It's the only way to redeem yourself." Meanwhile, in his hotel, Edward was planning his next move. He hadn't come this far to give up now. With contacts everywhere, it wouldn't take long to discover his family's whereabouts. "You can run, Mary," he muttered to himself, "but you can't hide forever." At the country house, at night, Sarah tried to calm Emily, who was having trouble sleeping. Jake remained isolated, struggling with his own conflicting emotions. "Mom," Emily whispered, "is Dad a bad man?" Sarah felt her heart tighten. How to explain something so complex to a child? "Your father made mistakes, sweetie. Serious mistakes. But what matters is that we're together and safe now." Jake, who had been listening at the door, entered the room. "But for how long? How long are we going to keep running?" Sarah extended her arm, inviting her son to join the hug. After a moment of hesitation, Jake yielded, allowing himself to be enveloped by the familiar warmth. "I don't know what the future holds for us," Sarah admitted, "but I promise that whatever happens, we'll face it together." As the family cuddled together, finding comfort in each other, Robert worked tirelessly at the mansion. He was determined not only to protect Sarah and the children, but also to expose Edward's illegal dealings once and for all. The night advanced, laden with promises and threats. In different corners of the city, people plotted, planned, and dreamed. Sarah, in her temporary refuge, allowed herself a moment of hope. Robert, in his office, vowed to himself that he would do everything in his power to keep safe those who, unexpectedly, had become so important to him. And in the shadows, Edward waited, patient as a predator, ready to strike at the right moment. The board was set, the pieces in motion. The next move could change everything, for better or worse. The morning would bring new challenges, new revelations, and perhaps the chance for a new beginning. But for now, in the quietness of the night, each of the players in this elaborate drama prepared for what was to come, knowing that everyone's fate hung by a thread. As dawn broke over the country house, Sarah and her children were preparing for what could be the most decisive day of their lives. The plan was set, but they all knew that confronting Edward Thompson would be like entering a lion's den. "Remember," Robert instructed over the phone, his voice firm, "we need to stay calm no matter what happens. Edward is dangerous, but we have the truth on our side." Sarah hugged her children tightly. "Jake, Emily, you'll stay here with the security team. No matter what you hear or see, don't leave this room until I or Robert come back, understood?" The children nodded, their eyes wide with fear and concern. Jake, always the protector, held his younger sister's hand. "We'll be fine, Mom," he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Just come back soon, okay?" Sarah felt her heart ache. "I promise, my love. We'll be back before you know it." Meanwhile, outside the property, Edward was preparing to make his move. He wasn't alone. Two menacing-looking men accompanied him. "Remember," Edward instructed, "I want my family alive. Anderson, well, accidents happen, don't they?" The men nodded grimly, checking their weapons. Back at the house, Robert received a message on his cell phone. "It's time," he announced. "Edward is on his way." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. Martha, pale but determined, held a folder with the evidence against Edward. "Let's end this once and for all," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. The group went out to the front garden just as Edward's car was parking. The air seemed charged with electricity when Edward got out of the vehicle, his cold smile freezing Sarah's blood. "Mary, my dear," he said, his voice falsely sweet. "Or should I say, Sarah, we finally meet again." Robert stepped forward, protectively placing himself in front of Sarah. "This ends here, Thompson. We have proof of all your crimes. It's better to surrender peacefully." Edward laughed, a humorless sound. "Proof? What proof? Do you really think you can threaten me, Anderson?" It was then that Martha stepped forward, the folder in her hands trembling slightly. "This proof, Mr. Thompson. Documents, recordings, everything needed to put you behind bars for a long, long time." Edward's smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "Martha, my dear, what a disappointment. I thought we were friends." "This is over, Edward," Sarah intervened, her voice finding strength. "I won't live in fear anymore. I won't let you threaten my children or the people I love." Edward narrowed his eyes, his facade of calm beginning to crack. "Love? Is that right? Found yourself a new Prince Charming, Mary?" At that moment, the two men accompanying Edward advanced menacingly. Robert immediately placed himself in front of Sarah and Martha. "Don't do anything stupid, Thompson," Robert warned. The police are on their way. It's better to surrender now." Edward laughed again, but there was a touch of desperation in his voice. "You don't understand? I always win. Always." Everything happened very quickly after that. Edward made a gesture to his men, who advanced. Robert reacted, engaging in a physical struggle with one of them. Sarah screamed. Martha dropped the folder, scattering documents on the ground. In the midst of the chaos, a shot was fired. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone froze, looking in shock at the scene before them. Edward was on the ground, holding his bleeding arm. The shot had grazed him, but it was enough to incapacitate him. His men, seeing their leader fallen, hesitated. It was at this moment that sirens began to sound in the distance, rapidly approaching. "It's over, Edward," Sarah said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "It's time to face the consequences of your actions." Minutes later, the property was filled with police officers. Edward and his men were detained, the evidence carefully collected. Sarah watched it all as if in a dream, barely believing that the nightmare had finally ended. Robert approached her, a cut on his forehead, but his eyes shining with relief. "It's over, Sarah. You're safe now." Sarah threw herself into his arms, tears finally flowing freely. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." When Sarah left the office, she felt lighter, more confident. Maybe, she thought, this drastic change was exactly what she and her children needed. As the sun set over the property, painting the sky in golden hues, a new chapter was beginning in everyone's lives. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, with certainty. There would be a long legal process ahead, emotional wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But that night, wrapped in the comfort of knowing they were finally free and safe, Sarah, her children, and Robert allowed themselves to dream of the possibilities the future might bring. Weeks passed since the confrontation with Edward. Life at the Anderson mansion gradually resumed a rhythm of normalcy, though the emotional scars were still fresh for everyone involved. Sarah, now officially known to all as Mary Dawson, was determined to rebuild her life and that of her children. With Robert's unconditional support, she began the process of regularizing her legal situation and that of the children. One sunny afternoon, Sarah found Robert in his office, surrounded by papers and looking exhausted. "You need to rest a bit," she said softly, placing a cup of coffee on his desk. Robert smiled, grateful for her concern. "Thank you, but there's so much to be done. The case against Edward, regularizing your documents, not to mention the business affairs." Sarah sat down across from him, her face serious. "Robert, we need to talk about this, about us." Robert's heart raced. Since the confrontation, they had been so busy dealing with the practical consequences that they had barely had time to address their growing feelings for each other. "Sarah, or should I say Mary?" he began, hesitant. She smiled sadly. "Sarah is fine. It's who I've become, who I want to be from now on." Robert nodded, understanding. "Sarah, then, what do you want to say?" Sarah took a deep breath. "You've done so much for me, for my children, risked everything, and I can't deny that I've developed feelings for you." Robert's face lit up, but Sarah raised a hand, asking him to let her continue. "But we have to think about the children, about how this would affect our dynamics here at the mansion. And there's also the question of your condition." Robert frowned, remembering his infertility. "You mean the fact that I can't have children?" Sarah nodded, her eyes full of compassion. "I know how much that means to you, and I don't want you to feel pressured or think you're taking on a responsibility that isn't yours." Robert stood up, walking to the window. For a moment he remained silent, observing the garden where Jake and Emily were playing. "Sarah," he finally spoke, his voice laden with emotion. "When I found out I couldn't have children, I thought I'd never have a family. But look at them." He pointed to the children. "In the last few months, they've brought more joy to my life than I ever imagined possible." He turned to face her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "And you've shown me what it really means to love someone, unconditionally. I don't care if I can't have biological children. You three are the family I've always dreamed of having." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Robert." He knelt before her, taking her hands. "Sarah, I love you. I love all three of you. And if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life taking care of you, protecting you, being the father Jake and Emily deserve." Sarah sobbed, a mix of happiness and fear overtaking her. "But what if it doesn't work out? What if it's too soon? Robert smiled gently. Then we'll face that together as a family. We don't have to rush. We can take it slow, see how the children adapt. What matters is that we're in this together. At that moment, a knock on the door interrupted them. It was Martha, looking nervous. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but I thought you should know. Edward's sentence is in. He got 30 years in prison." Sarah let out a sigh of relief. Finally, the nightmare was truly over. Martha hesitated for a moment before continuing. I also came to say goodbye. I think it's time for me to move on, seek a new beginning away from here." Robert stood up, surprised. "Martha, you don't have to go. I know you made mistakes, but you also helped us in the end." Martha smiled sadly. "I appreciate it, sir, but I think we all need a fresh start. And seeing you two together, well, it makes me realize it's time for me to seek my own happiness elsewhere." Sarah approached Martha, extending her hand. "Thank you for everything, Martha. I hope you find what you're looking for." The two women looked at each other, years of distrust and rivalry dissolving in a moment of mutual understanding. After Martha's departure, Sarah and Robert turned their attention back to each other. "So," Robert said softly, "what do you say? Do you want to try to build a life together?" Sarah smiled, her heart full of hope for the first time in years. "Yes," she answered. "Let's try." They sealed the promise with a tender kiss, full of promises for the future. Outside, Jake and Emily watched the scene through the office window, their faces lit up with hopeful smiles. "I think we're going to have a new dad," Emily whispered, excited. Jake, though still cautious, couldn't help a small smile. "Yeah, I think so. And you know what, Emily? I think it's going to be good." As the sun set over the Anderson mansion, a new family was beginning to form. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, with many challenges and adjustments to be made. But with love, patience, and understanding, they would face each obstacle together. Night fell, bringing with it the promise of a new dawn, of a bright future full of possibilities. For Sarah, Robert, Jake, and Emily, it was the beginning of a new journey, a journey they would make side by side as a family. The following months brought significant changes for the newly formed family. Sarah, Robert, Jake, and Emily were learning to navigate their new reality with all the ups and downs that entailed. On a Sunday morning, the family was gathered in the mansion's kitchen. Robert, wearing an apron with the phrase "World's Best Dad," an early Father's Day gift from Emily, was attempting to make pancakes, while Sarah watched with a mixture of amusement and concern. "Are you sure you don't want help, dear?" she asked, trying not to laugh at the batter stuck to the ceiling. Robert smiled, determined. No, I promised the kids I'd make breakfast today." As that saying goes, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Jake, sitting at the table with an advanced physics book, a gift from Robert, looked up. Actually, the saying is, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, and in your case, it might be better to follow the advice. Everyone laughed, including Robert, who finally admitted defeat. Okay. How about we order a pizza?" "Pizza for breakfast?" Emily exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. Sarah pretended to consider for a moment. "Well, I suppose we can make an exception today, but only if it comes with plenty of vegetables." While waiting for the pizza to arrive, the family settled in the living room. Robert noticed that Jake seemed quieter than usual. "Is everything okay, son?" he asked gently. Jake hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's just that, well, Father's Day is coming up and—" Sarah and Robert exchanged worried glances. They knew the transition would be difficult for Jake, who was old enough to remember Edward. Robert sat down next to the boy. "Jake, I know I'm not your biological father, and I'd never try to replace him. But I want you to know that I love you like a son. If you'll let me, I'd like to be a father to you in whatever way you need me to be." Jake looked at Robert, his eyes full of conflicting emotions. I like you, Robert, a lot. It's just that it's complicated, you know?" Sarah joined them, hugging her son. "It's okay, my love, there's no rush. We can go at your pace." Emily, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "I already consider Robert my dad. He's much better than Edward." Emily's innocent declaration brought tears to everyone's eyes. Robert pulled her into a hug, feeling his heart overflow with love. The moment was interrupted by the doorbell. The pizza had arrived. As they ate, the conversation flowed more lightly, with Robert telling funny stories from his youth and Sarah sharing plans for the future. Later that day, Sarah found Robert in his office, looking thoughtful. "A penny for your thoughts?" she asked, sitting down beside him. Robert smiled, taking her hand. "I was thinking about how my life has changed in the last few months. You know, before I met you and the kids, I thought I had everything. Money, success, power. But I was so empty inside." Sarah nodded, understanding. "I know exactly what that's like. I spent so much time afraid, focused only on surviving, that I almost forgot what it was like to really live." Robert pulled her closer. "Sarah, I want to make this work. Not just for us, but for the children too. They deserve stability, love, a real family." "And they'll have it," Sarah assured. "We'll give that to them together." At that moment, Jake appeared in the office doorway, looking nervous. Robert," he called hesitantly. "I was wondering, could you help me with this physics problem? I'm kind of stuck." Robert's face lit up. "Of course, Jake. Let's take a look at that." As the two pored over the book, Sarah watched with a full heart. It was a small step, but a significant one. Jake was beginning to accept Robert in his life, to trust him. Night fell over the Anderson mansion, bringing with it a sense of peace and contentment. In the living room, the family gathered to watch a movie, snuggled up on a large sofa. Emily, nestled between Sarah and Robert, whispered, "This is nice, isn't it? The four of us together like this." Sarah exchanged an emotional look with Robert over the girl's head. "Yes, my love. It's very nice." Jake, sitting on the floor leaning against Robert's legs, allowed himself to relax, feeling for the first time in a long time that maybe, just maybe, things would really be okay. As the movie credits rolled, Robert looked at his family, because that's what they were now, a family, and felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost left him breathless. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome. But looking at Sarah, at Jake and Emily, he knew he would face anything for them. The future was uncertain, but full of promises. And together, as a family, they were ready to face it, one day at a time. Autumn arrived, bringing with it winds of change for the Anderson family. The golden leaves falling in the mansion's garden seemed to symbolize the new chapter beginning in everyone's lives. On a cool afternoon, Sarah was in Robert's office discussing a matter she had long been considering. "I want to go back to work, Robert," she said, determined. "Don't misunderstand me. I'm eternally grateful for everything you've done for us. But I need to have my own identity, my independence." Robert observed her for a moment, a proud smile forming on his lips. "I completely understand, Sarah. In fact, I have a proposal for you." He took a folder from his drawer and handed it to Sarah. "We're expanding the company's social responsibility division. I'd like you to lead it." Sarah opened the folder, her eyes scanning the project details. It was ambitious: social housing programs, scholarships, environmental initiatives, everything she had always dreamed of doing. "Robert, this is amazing," she said, emotional. "But are you sure? I don't want people to think I got the position just because of our relationship." Robert took her hands. "Sarah, you're the most qualified person I know for this job. Your life experience, your empathy, your determination, it's exactly what we need. The fact that we're together is just a bonus." Sarah hugged him, tears of happiness in her eyes. "Thank you for believing in me." Meanwhile, at school, Jake was facing his own challenges. His talent for physics and mathematics had caught the attention of teachers, who suggested he skip a grade. "I don't know, Mom," Jake confessed to Sarah that night. "What if I don't fit in with the older students? What if it's too much for me?" Sarah sat on the edge of her son's bed. "Jake, you're brilliant. I know you can handle it, but the decision is yours. We don't want to pressure you." Robert, who was listening from the door, entered the room. "Can I give my opinion?" Jake nodded, curious. "When I was your age," Robert began, "I had a similar opportunity, but I was afraid and refused. I've always regretted not at least trying." Jake considered the words for a moment. "What if I try and it doesn't work out?" "Then you go back to your original class," Robert replied simply. "There's no shame in that. The important thing is to try." Sarah smiled, grateful for how Robert handled the situation. "Think about it, son. You don't have to decide now." As the adults were leaving the room, Emily came running in holding a paper. "Look, Mom, I was chosen for the lead role in the school play." Sarah took the script, reading the title, "The Princess and the Frog." "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. You're going to be a beautiful princess." Emily's face fell a little. "Actually, I'm going to be the frog." Robert couldn't contain a laugh, which earned him a disapproving look from Sarah. "The frog is a very important role, Emily," Sarah said, trying to cheer up her daughter. "After all, he's the one who goes through the whole transformation in the story." Emily seemed to consider this. "That's true. And I have the best lines." The family laughed together, the earlier tension dissipating. Later that night, with the children in bed, Sarah and Robert talked on the porch, enjoying the starry night. "You know," Robert said thoughtfully, "sometimes I find myself thinking about how drastically our life has changed in such a short time." Sarah nodded, leaning back against him. "It's true, a year ago I was running away fearing for the future. And now? And now we have a family," Robert completed, kissing her forehead. "Sarah, there's something I want to ask you." He stood up, taking something from his pocket. Sarah felt her heart race when she saw the small velvet box in his hand. Robert knelt before her, opening the box to reveal a beautiful diamond ring. "Sarah Mitchell, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of making official this family we've built together?" Sarah felt tears of happiness streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered, "1,000 times yes." They kissed, sealing the promise of a future together. The next day, when they shared the news with the children, they were met with mixed reactions. Emily jumped for joy, already making plans for the dress she would wear. Jake, on the other hand, seemed hesitant. "Jake," Sarah called softly. "What do you think, son?" Jake looked from Sarah to Robert, his expression serious. "Are you sure about this? What if it doesn't work out?" Robert knelt to be at eye level with the boy. "Jake, I love your mother, I love you and your sister. Love you. I can't promise everything will be perfect, but I can promise that I'll do everything in my power to make you happy." Jake considered the words for a moment, before finally breaking into a small smile. "Okay. I think it'll be nice to have a real dad." The hug that followed was emotional, marking the beginning of a new phase for the Anderson family. As they planned the wedding and prepared for the new challenges that would come, Sarah's new job, Jake's possible grade change, Emily's play, they knew that together they could overcome any obstacle. Night fell over the mansion, enveloping the family in its starry mantle. The future was uncertain but full of promises, and they were ready to face it, united by love and the hope of even better days to come. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity for the Anderson family. Preparations for Sarah and Robert's wedding were in full swing, with Emily happily assuming the unofficial role of bride's assistant. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Sarah was in the mansion's garden with Emily, discussing flower arrangements, when Jake approached, looking nervous. "Mom, Robert, can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked, anxiously fidgeting with a piece of paper in his hands. Sarah and Robert exchanged intrigued glances. "Of course, son, what is it?" Jake took a deep breath before speaking. I decided to accept the offer to skip a grade at school." Sarah's face lit up with pride. "Oh, Jake, that's wonderful." Robert smiled, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, son. I know it wasn't an easy decision." Jake nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. "Yeah, well, I thought about what you said, Robert, about trying, and, well, I want to try." Sarah hugged her son, feeling her heart overflow with love and pride. "We'll support you every step of the way, my love." Emily, who had been watching the scene, suddenly clapped excitedly. "This deserves a celebration." "How about a special dinner?" Robert laughed. "Great idea, Princess. What if I cook today?" A momentary silence fell over the group, followed by nervous laughter. Robert's culinary attempts had become a kind of family joke. Sarah diplomatically intervened. "How about if we all cook together? It could be fun." The idea was received with enthusiasm, and soon the family was in the kitchen, in the midst of a cheerful mess of ingredients and utensils. While preparing dinner, Robert noticed that Sarah seemed a bit pale. "Is everything okay, love?" he asked discreetly. Sarah smiled, though she looked a little tired. "I'm fine, just a bit nauseous. Must be the stress of the wedding preparations." Robert observed her for a moment, concerned, but was distracted by Emily asking if she could add chocolate to the tomato sauce. The dinner ended up being a surprising success, with everyone contributing to create a delicious meal. As they ate, the conversation flowed animatedly, with Jake sharing his plans and expectations for the new school year. Days later, Sarah was in her new office at the company, reviewing some documents for the social housing project, when she felt another wave of nausea. Worried, she decided to make an appointment with her doctor. The next morning, Sarah left the doctor's office in a state of shock. She walked distractedly through the park nearby, trying to process the news she had just received. Pregnant. She was pregnant. Emotions flooded her: joy, fear, concern. How would this affect the wedding? How would Jake and Emily react? And Robert? Oh, Robert. Sarah knew how much infertility had affected him, how he had accepted that he would never have biological children. And now, she sat on a park bench, taking deep breaths to calm herself. She needed to tell Robert first, before anyone else. That night, after the children went to bed, Sarah found Robert in his office. "Honey, can we talk?" she asked softly. Robert looked up from his papers, immediately noticing Sarah's serious expression. "Of course, love. Is everything okay?" Sarah sat down, taking Robert's hands in hers. "Robert, I went to the doctor today." Robert's face paled. "What happened? Are you sick?" Sarah smiled tremulously. "No, I'm not sick. I'm pregnant." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Robert stared at her, his eyes wide with shock. "Pregnant?" he finally whispered. "But how? I thought—" "I know," Sarah said softly. "The doctor said sometimes this happens. That it's not common, but it's possible." Robert abruptly stood up, walking to the window. Sarah watched him anxiously, unsure of how he was feeling. Finally, he turned, and Sarah saw tears in his eyes. "A baby," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We're going to have a baby." Sarah stood up, going to him. "Yes, we are. Are you happy?" In response, Robert pulled her into a tight hug, laughing and crying at the same time. "Happy, Sarah, I'm ecstatic. It's a miracle." They stayed like that for a long moment, embracing, sharing their joy and emotion. "How are we going to tell the children?" Robert finally asked. Sarah smiled. "We'll think of something special. Maybe after the wedding." Robert nodded, kissing her softly. "Yes, let's focus on one thing at a time, but Sarah, thank you for giving me this family, this love, for giving me everything." As they prepared for bed that night, Sarah and Robert could barely contain their happiness. The future, which already seemed bright, now shone with even more promises. Outside the mansion, the full moon bathed the garden in its silvery light, as if blessing the growing family not just in number, but in love and unity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, telling the children, adjusting wedding plans, preparing for the baby's arrival. But together they were ready to face anything. The night advanced, enveloping the Anderson mansion in its starry mantle, while inside a family dreamed of the bright future that awaited them. The big day finally arrived. The Anderson mansion was unrecognizable, transformed into a fairy tale setting for Sarah and Robert's wedding. The garden, covered in white and gold flowers, seemed to have come straight out of a dream. Sarah was in her room putting the finishing touches on her dress when Emily entered, already wearing her bridesmaid dress. "Mom, you look beautiful!" exclaimed the girl, her eyes shining with admiration. Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of emotion. "Thank you, my love. You look wonderful too." At that moment, Jake appeared at the door, looking a bit uncomfortable in his suit. "It's time, Mom," he said, a small smile on his lips. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling a mix of nervousness and happiness. "I'm ready," she said, picking up her bouquet. Outside, Robert waited anxiously at the improvised altar. His heart raced when the wedding march began to play, and he saw Sarah walking towards him, radiant in her white dress, flanked by Jake and Emily. The ceremony was emotional and intimate, with only close friends and family present. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the happiness on Sarah and Robert's faces was palpable. During the reception, while the guests danced and enjoyed themselves, Sarah and Robert exchanged complicit glances. It was time to share the big news with the children. They called Jake and Emily to a quiet corner of the garden. "Children," Robert began, his voice trembling slightly with emotion, "your mother and I have something very important to tell you." Jake and Emily looked at them curiously, sensing the seriousness of the moment. Sarah took a deep breath before speaking. "Jake, Emily, you're going to have a little brother or sister." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Emily was the first to react, her eyes widening with surprise and joy. "A baby? Really? This is amazing!" she exclaimed, jumping with excitement. Jake, on the other hand, looked confused. "But I thought Robert couldn't have children," he said hesitantly. Robert knelt to be at eye level with the boy. "It's true, Jake. The doctor said it would be very difficult for me to have children, but sometimes miracles happen." Sarah joined them, hugging both children. "What do you think about this, my loves?" Emily could hardly contain her happiness. "I've always wanted to be a big sister. Can I help take care of the baby?" Sarah laughed, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Of course you can, dear." Jake remained silent for a moment, processing the news. Finally, he looked at Robert. "So, the baby will be your real child?" Robert felt his heart tighten, understanding the implicit concern in Jake's question. "Jake, look at me," he said gently. "You and Emily are my real children. Blood doesn't define family. Love defines it, and I love you too just as much as I'll love this baby." Jake's eyes filled with tears, and he hugged Robert tightly. "I love you too, Dad," he whispered. Sarah watched the scene, her own eyes watering. It was the first time Jake had called Robert Dad, and the moment couldn't have been more perfect. The family hugged, united in their love and happiness. When they returned to the party, their faces were shining with a joy that went beyond the celebration of the wedding. As the night progressed, Sarah and Robert danced slowly, absorbed in each other. "Happy, Mrs. Anderson?" Robert asked, smiling. Sarah laughed softly. "More than I ever imagined possible, Mr. Anderson." They watched Jake and Emily dancing awkwardly together, laughing and having fun. "Look at them," Sarah said, emotional. "Who would have thought that, after everything we've been through, we'd find so much happiness?" Robert kissed her forehead lovingly. "It's just the beginning, my love. We have a lifetime ahead of us." As the guests began to say goodbye, Sarah and Robert prepared for their honeymoon. They would spend a week on a paradise island, leaving the children in the care of Sarah's trusted aunt. "Behave, okay?" Sarah said, hugging Jake and Emily. "And remember, it's our little secret for now. Don't tell anyone about the baby until we get back," the children solemnly promised, although Emily could barely contain her excitement. When the car that would take the newlyweds to the airport drove away, Jake and Emily stood waving until it disappeared from view. "Do you think we'll be good older siblings?" Emily asked Jake. Jake smiled, putting his arm around his sister's shoulders. "We'll be the best, Emily. Together we can do anything." Night fell over the Anderson mansion, the stars shining like silent witnesses to a new chapter that was beginning. The family, now officially united and about to grow, would face new challenges and joys. But one thing was certain: the love that united them was stronger than any obstacle they might encounter. And with that love as a foundation, the future had never looked so bright.